Last night, tens of thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters marched in Washington, D.C. to demand a ceasefire in Gaza. Israel says it won't stop its military campaign until Hamas is destroyed. At yesterday's march, there were no calls for Hamas to release the 240-plus hostages who are being held by Hamas. Well, my next guest has been one of Israel's most steadfast defenders in the U.S. Congress for the last few years. Ritchie Torres is the U.S. House Representative for New York's 15th District. Welcome to you. Thank you very much for being with us, Representative.
An honor to be here.
You represent a predominantly black and Hispanic district in New York. You're a progressive Democrat. I think it's fair to say the Jewish vote isn't a key part of your constituency. Why are you such a strong supporter of Israel?
Well, first, I do represent a vibrant Jewish community in Riverdale, which has deep ties to the state of Israel. But second, for me, this is not only about siding with Israel, which is America's greatest ally in the Middle East. This is about human decency. Now, October 7th was a crime against the Jewish state, a crime against humanity that was so barbaric that it cannot be ignored. It cannot go unpunished. Hamas must be brought to justice. Israel has every right to do to Hamas what the United States did to ISIS and Al-Qaeda in the 21st century, what the U.S. and its allies did to the Nazis in the 20th century. We have a moral obligation to rid the world of its terror. And so I stand unequivocally for Israel's right to defend itself.
Some of the most anti-Israel voices in the U.S. Congress are your fellow Democrats. I'm talking about Cori Bush, Rashida Tlaib, and Ilhan Omar. Is this the future of the Democratic Party?
Look, President Biden has been unequivocally pro-Israel. Leader Chuck Schumer, Leader Hakeem Jeffries have both been unequivocally pro-Israel. I would tell people not to mistake a fringe for the mainstream of the Democratic Party. Be careful not to mistake a visible vocal minority for a majority. An overwhelming majority of Democrats support Israel's right to defend itself. And there's no doubt in my mind that in the end, we're going to provide Israel with the funding that it needs to defend itself in the face of barbaric terrorism.
You've also been, I should point out, an outspoken critic of extremist voices here in Israel. You called Itamar Ben-Gvir a disgusting demagogue. I think that's how you put it. How would you say voices like Ben-Gvir are harming Israel's image around the world?
Well, keep in mind that Israel's enemies in the United States and elsewhere will seize on comments from figures like Ben-Gvir to undermine support for Israel. So I can tell you that demagogues are unhelpful to the cause of fighting for Israel, but there's no doubt in my mind that Israel is a fundamentally good country. It's an ally of the United States. I see the war as a struggle between good and evil, as a struggle between civilization and barbarism. And good must prevail over evil, and civilization must prevail over barbarism, and that's what's at stake.
We've seen really disturbing scenes of anti-Semitic hate and open support for Hamas in New York and elsewhere in the United States, but particularly on university campuses. One professor at Cornell said he found what happened on October 7th energizing and inspiring. How do you explain this level of hatred and on university campuses, among educated people, and what can be done about it?
Look, I worry that the hysterical and hyperbolic demonization of Israel as a Jewish state has led to a global outbreak of anti-Semitic violence and vandalism and vitriol. And one of the ground zeros of anti-Semitism is college campuses. I worry that the next generation of Americans, too many of them, have been indoctrinated with a hatred for Israel that is so virulent that it has rendered them indifferent to the cold-blooded murder of Israeli civilians and children. And so one of the lessons learned from the aftermath of October 7th is that there needs to be a real reckoning with the deep rot of anti-Semitism, not only in academia, but on social media, in corporate America, in every aspect of American life. And I'm going to do my best to fight against the plague of anti-Semitism here in the United States.
And another very upsetting and very visual example of the hatred that we're seeing is the posters of the hostages being ripped down in New York City by all sorts of different people. That is something that's been hard to see as well. Do you get any criticism for your position?
Look, there's no issue on which I receive more hate and harassment than on the issue of Israel. But I know I'm fighting for the right cause. For me, I'm not only standing with Israel, I'm not only standing with the Jewish community, I'm standing on the side of human decency. And I'm going to do what I think is right. I'm going to stand for what I believe is right, even if it means standing alone.
It is true, though, isn't it, that progressive politics, or so-called progressive politics, these days is very much aligned with the Palestinian cause and very much against Israel. How can that narrative be challenged, do you think, by people on your side of the aisle?
Look, I reject the notion that you cannot be both progressive and pro-Israel. I'm Black, Latino, LGBTQ, millennial, progressive, and pro-Israel. And I'm pro-Israel not despite my progressive values, but because of my progressive values. And I want to be crystal clear. There's nothing remotely progressive about tearing down posters of hostages. There's nothing remotely progressive about glorifying the terrorism of Hamas as resistance. There's nothing remotely progressive about lionizing the paragliders who gunned down 260 young Israelis at music festivals. Right? Celebrating terrorism is the opposite of progressivism. It's a perversion of progressivism, and I will expose it as such.
Okay. Well, it's great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed, Congressman. Congressman Ritchie Torres there. Thank you.